let me introduce myself. I'm Debbie. I started out in the games industry at the age of 17. I've got a mixed age group in this audience, but for the younger ones of you, I was quite young. I co-founded Team 17 when I was 20. Makes me sound like I really knew what I wanted to do in life, right? Starting a company at that age. I would say yes, I'd also say no, and I'll share some of that along this journey. A little bit about my background. Team 17, most people go Team 17 West Yorkshire, right? How many of you think Team 17 is just West Yorkshire here? All right, to give you an idea, I was born at Kingsmill Hospital. I'm from Nottingham. I live 10 minutes down the road. We also have a second office in Nottingham. We keep it quite low-key and low profile, but it's where our games label publishing team work. That's our marketing, PR, biz dev, AV, community team, and a lot of other people. So just so you guys know a little bit more about Team 17 there. So let's get started. I'm going to tell you, we've got people here, Team 17, this is what we do, I guess. Most of you know us for Worms. Hands up, how many know Worms? The ones who don't, can you put your hands up, please? Why? I'm joking, don't worry. Okay, Team 17. We make games. We play games. We're all gamers. We're all passionate about this. I'll share later on throughout this deck how we help others make games too. Most importantly, we aim to help others build sustainable businesses. You know it sounds boring when I say business, but trust me, bills have to be paid. I employ over 100 people for Team 17. Across my label, I have another 150 that I'm responsible for. Making games is a business. It's also fun. It's the best industry. So let's show you just a little bit. There's not going to be too many videos throughout this, but let's start with a good one. This is a little bit of who Team 17 are today. Okay, how many people know or have played games? Just do this, please, of any of those games. Okay, so thank you very much for buying our games. That's really important to me. We help make independent games, and on behalf of the teams who make these games, trust me, some of those people are one-person teams making these games. Overcooked was made by 2 people. Just to put that in perspective, 2 guys. I'm going to start this at the beginning of our journey. I'm laughing because my notes in here, you guys are so young, but obviously we have a mixed audience, so I don't feel quite so old today, thank you. I was about to explain, Team 17 are 25 years old. Well, 27, December 7th this year is our birthday. How did Team 17 become what Team 17 started out? Just a little bit of a background. I started out at 17 in games retail. That was how I broke into the games industry. Probably one of the best experiences I had. I couldn't believe people actually paid me to play games, by the way, at that age. It was a great way to understand and get to experience games. So I started out in retail at 17. Within 3 years, I was approached along with, there was a company called Microbyte. Most of you will never have ever heard of this retail chain, but it was prior to Game. Game acquired that chain, which then became Game in the UK and many other things. I was over on the retail side. We also owned a company called 17-Bit Software. For any 16-bit Amiga fans here, do we have, yeah, hey, great. I'm really not the oldest person in the room tonight. Thank you. Cheers. So we had 17-Bit Software, which is an interesting company. 17-Bit were a shareware public domain catalog library. Basically, talented people from around the world would make their demos and we would distribute them for them. So as a business, we owned a retail chain, we owned 17-bit software, so we kind of went, okay, this is a bit like having your own app stores back in 1989, 1990. We've got talent that we can reach out to look to make games, and we own the retail chain to sell direct to consumers. So why don't we set up a games publisher, right? Kind of makes sense. So 3 of us founded Team 17. And it was in a time that was called the 16-bit era, before 4K, before HD. The internet was just about around, you know. I think my first one, we had an Amiga, so we had some cool stuff. Most of our business was run on Amigas back in those days. But some of you may recognize some of these games. And if you do, you're really old, right? Okay, I like the nods. Team 17's just clipped off at the top, so you can't really see it. Game on the left-hand side, right at the top here, Full Contact. That was Team 17's very, very first ever game that we released. Why did we choose a fighting game? Well, we kind of had a bit of retail knowledge, and I was a big IK Plus fan, you know, back in those days, and fighting games kind of sold really well, so it seemed obvious to do that. And the teams that we were working with, so we created our first game. But what we did something with a difference. We wanted to hit the games industry from a publishing side with a bang. So what we did, we created a full price game and we released it back in those days at the equivalent of a budget price point, literally to make a great impact. Immediately the game went straight to #1. To give you an idea, most people know Team 17 for Worms. But between 1990 and 1994, Team 17 released over 20 titles. None of them were called Worms. At one point, we had around 53% market share of the Amiga market in the UK, so it shows you the strength of Team 17 as brand back then. And I got to work with some really cool people. For those of you who don't know, Super Stardust, I'm sure a lot of you know Housemarque. They made Resogun. You know, we published that game for them, and we've had a close working relationship, and they're good friends of mine even today. Silver Ball, right at the top, the middle one, was created by Epic Mega Games. How many of you know the Unreal Engine? Okay, that's what they made back then. And we were their publishing partner over here. So a little bit of history there about the 16-bit era. What I would say, everybody talks about indie games publishing and indie developers today. That was indie development. This was small teams, 1, 2 man, sometimes 5, 10, 15, you know, all over, working out of their small offices, bedrooms, whatever. And Team 17 was an indie games publisher in the early 90s. We all think this is something new, and it's only been happening in the last 5 years. Just want to share with you, this was the early 90s, 16-bit era of what was happening. And it's an incredible thing for us, and I will touch on this later on in our journey, but I do want you to remember what Team 17 was here, because it will come back up again in a bit. Worms, okay. I'm going to share with you, because I think this is quite inspirational for young games makers today. Some of you may know the story, but Worms was created by a guy called Andy Davidson. Andy, when he first started messing with this, was in sixth form in school. I think he first created it on a calculator. I don't think that story's been shared publicly, so don't share it on Twitter, please. I could get in trouble. The game was first created on a calculator to play with his friends in maths in sixth form. He then wrote the game in Blitz Basic, entered it into a competition for Amiga format. The game, ironically, didn't win. Team 17, being the Amiga people that they were, we attended a number of events. These days you would call it indie events like your EGX. Back then it was an event called ECTS. People would show up in the same way that they do today still, where they bring, back then it was, here's a disc, check out my game, and we would look. This guy came walking up to me at ECTS in London. He was about 6'1", 6'2", super slim, and he just said, I love you, I want you to publish my game. And I'm like, who are you? And I said, let's go and have a look, because that's who we were, and that's still who we are today. Put this game on the Amiga, not what you will know Worms as. It changed a lot in terms of, I can't say too much on the visual side, because even when I look back at what Worms 1 looked like, I'm like, wow, tells you we were all about gameplay back then. That's all we were about. Played the game, literally. We went crazy for it. I have to tell you, we finished that day's work at ECTS. Back then, most of us would just go to a bar and hang out with gaming people. We didn't. We set up an Amiga and we played Worms all night. We could not get enough of it. One of my business partners, Martin Brown, at the time, was given Andy's details, and this is public, so I can't get in trouble for this one. Andy gave him his details. So we've got this amazing game just been shown to us. We're all playing it that night. Finished the show, went back to the office. We need to get in touch with this guy. We want to sign it. We want to publish this game. Martin had lost contact details. Right. We knew the game had entered the competition at Amiga format. We knew Future Publishing quite well. We got in touch with Future Publishing. They gave us Andy's details. And the rest, I guess, is history. What is really interesting for Worms is it was all about gameplay. And I think a lot of what we still do today is gameplay. We're gamers, we love gameplay. We launched, I think it was mid-November 1995. Game went straight to #1. We actually couldn't get concept approval from Sony America to release on PlayStation. It was 2D graphics. They didn't want 2D graphics at that point. So we had to work a little bit of magic there in terms of charming them and praying that we delivered good. Worms, I think in that first year went on sale something like 2 million units. It's what I would class as the first mainstream indie game released in the games industry. When people talk about indie development, Worms, in my opinion, is exactly one of the very, very, very first commercially, hugely mainstream, mass market, successful indie games ever created. Don't want to dwell too much on it because we do have a lot of things that I do want to share with you about who we are today and what things that we do, but I think it's important that we do touch on Worms because Worms also had a big impact on Team 17. I shared with you who we were and where we started. We then went on to spend the next decade. I've made a lot of versions of Worms. A lot of versions of Worms. We've worked on probably every single piece of hardware known that. I think we've released on every PlayStation platform, every Nintendo platform, every Sega platform, every Nintendo platform, every Xbox, don't forget Microsoft Epic, all of their platforms. We very smartly were very early into a few areas. One was digital download. My first PC download was 2000. My first mobile game downloaded was 2001 in South Korea. We were the first Western people to actually have a hit in South Korea. Worms, ironically, is hugely famous in China and South Korea, so it's quite a global brand. Some of this stuff was quite important to us because I think we lost our way a little bit here. We forgot that we were handling all these amazing, talented people all over. Worms was our first multi-million success title. People say to me, how did you feel? When I look back on that, I'm delighted, ecstatic, I'm so proud. But at the same time, we were also incredibly young. We had egos, we were a little bit rock star-ish, we thought we could do whatever we could do. So a lesson that I would like to share with people is go careful when success happens, keep those egos in check. It can be incredibly damaging on a business as you're growing. We wasted a lot of money, a lot of time, thinking we could just do this on every platform. You know, to put the success of Worms in perspective for the younger people in the audience, Worms had twice as much media coverage as FIFA and Tomb Raider that first year it launched. Andy, the creator, there wasn't a single national newspaper that hadn't covered this guy across that media. And, you know, we were all in our early 20s. So just a lesson there for people just to think about. 2013, this is an important one. I shared at the start, there was a group of us, 3 of us, that started this business. Myself, a guy called Martin Brown, and a guy called Michael Robinson. Michael Robinson hadn't really been involved in the business for a few years. He had the bulk of the company, had 70% of the company. This is the time I did a management buyout. Right. For those of you who know what that involves, it's hard work. I bought out my fellow shareholders, looked at Team 17 as a company, restructured it. Team 17 was a typical games developer where they would have a very successful year, following year, a loss. And this is due to the time that games development takes. You know, a lot of games can take 2 years. You release your game, spike on sales, then as it dwindles down until your next game comes and back up again. We call it a yo-yo business. That's what Team 17 was up until around 2013. Core objectives for me were to actually start to look at building Team 17 into a sustainable business. I hate to be really boring on this, but like I said, it's a business. So we had to change a lot of our company, a lot of our culture, and get their mindsets more open into just an agile way of thinking, an agile way of working. A lot of our games developers in our studio, they jump from platform to platform like you've never seen in terms of games development. When I shared with my own teams what was going on in the indie scene, I think one of the first things I did with one, and I won't say which department, but I sat them down and I actually showed them a game and I said, what do you think to this game? And they went, wow, that's amazing. I went, one person's making that game and he's got a full-time job. That's your competition these days. You know, as an established company, that's our competition. We have to look at this. So basically, sustainability took 2 years, back-to-back profit, back-to-back growth, roadmap going forward, everything looked hunky-dory. You'd go, you must have been delighted. Of course I was delighted. Bad news, I was bored. I got really bored. I'd been making Worms for a long time, been looking after a company, and it was at that point where it was, what do we do? Remember that stuff right at the start with those different games and those partners and working with amazing talent all around the world? I wanted to do that again. At the time, Worms 3 was #1 on mobile in something like 125 countries. The whole world was telling me I was insane to be going into premium PC and console to handle developers and help them bring their games through to market when I could easily just put Worms in free to play. I have to be honest, passion. This is my passion. I love making video games and the kind of games that I want to make and I want to work on. And I also love working with games development and bringing those people through. So we made the decision in 2013 that we were going to change our business and we were going to radically change a lot of things about what we did. You know, please don't curse me for the profitability and the business mentions today. This is why Team 17 is one of the oldest existing video games development companies in this country. It's also why Team 17 are the UK's largest privately owned games publisher today. It's a business. you know. So what we did here was I wanted to do something a little bit different. My passion's games development. I love working with creators. I love building things. I love working with, when people say to me, I can't do something, I want to try. I just have to try. So what we wanted to do was give back, and give back in a way that was important for us. Bear in mind where we've come from. Our journey started in the 90s. A lot of indie development, bedroom coders, a lot of independent businesses. Certainly for the older guys in this room and folks, you will have known companies like Bitmap Brothers and all those companies that were around. This is 2013. They weren't here. They were gone. I'd seen a lot of my friends' companies either being acquired by large publishers and they've been closed down, or I'd just seen them go out of business. Right, so I was looking at the UK games industry and I was actually feeling quite sad, you know, and I'm like, where's that early 90s entrepreneurial spirit gone? Where's that indie development spirit gone? How do we help give this back? How do we help to get this moving a little bit better in the UK? So it was decided that we were going to not do a games publisher. People who have maybe heard me talk before, or people who follow me on Twitter or anything like that, I don't even really like the word games publisher. It kind of sends shivers down my spine about I've had my fair share of missed milestones too, you know, when I was a developer working with publishers. So we wanted to build a games label. Our games label was inspired by the music industry. This is where it's all about the artist. It's all about what the creation is. Nothing, absolutely nothing is more important than those two aspects. And so we decided to put our hearts into it and try something a little bit different. The focus being on being collaborative. Team 17 internally have around 100 games development staff who are pure games development. We were going to ask our people to work with us in a very different way here, where we would be working with talent from around the world, and we were going to help them make games. Good example here is The Escapist that some of you people may know here. Little is known about Chris, the creator. Chris shies away from the spotlight quite a lot. Chris is actually from Derby, just down the road. Chris wrote the game in Fusion. If you don't know what Fusion is, don't panic. We had to Google it too, you know. And we surrounded Chris with a team that could actually help him from game design, additional code. Team 17 rewrote The Escapist in Unity for console releases. It took us 7 weeks. That might frighten you, but we've been doing this a long time. But we had it up and running on the Xbox One and PS4 within 7 weeks, and it was on a show floor for consumers to play. But this is about being collaborative. We were going to actually use our resources and say to the developers that we're working with, tell us what you need, and we will help you. This is something that no publisher in my entire history has ever offered to a developer before, so this is something that we were going to do different. Having empathy. Anybody who tells you making games is easy is a liar. It's one of the hardest things that I know. Understanding the roller coaster of emotions. We all have good days, we all have bad days. You know, we've just finished wrapping up The Escapist 2 in our own studio. We've been working on that for 18 months. It's hard work. Making games is hard work. One of the most important things was our understanding as a games developer. When you're sitting and you're talking to people about publishing their games or helping them, is understanding that perspective. Their problems are our problems. We understand how difficult it is. If they need expertise where they need to speak to a network engineer, they speak to our network engineers. They need to talk to art directors for whatever reason, you know, in terms of they want to try a different art style. Again, we understood that side. So this, again, was something that was very different in terms of a games developer working with games developers. Belief in people power. I can't stress the importance of people enough in not just business, but in everything that we do. Team 17, you know, I can talk about the people that I work with and go, my work colleagues, wrong. they're part of my family. They're my life. We've been working together for such a long time. But the importance for us is understanding the importance of how important people are to success. Super crucial. So what we wanted was building a business with a heart. Sounds really corny, I'm sorry, but it's a passion thing. Everything about our games label is a passion. We want to help, we want to give back, we want to build new businesses, we want to help creators create new IP. And we don't own any of that IP, it's their IP. We just help them on their journey. You know, there's great examples of our label and the way that it works. I think Chris, Mouldy Tooth Studios on The Escapist, you know, he's done all right. He's 4 million downloads now, so it's no secret. He's quite a wealthy person these days. But he was buying a house for his parents and his first house last year, and he phoned me up and he said, "Don't know what to do, Debbie." I went, "Don't worry, I'll put you in touch with my solicitors." You know, publishers don't do this. They don't even talk about that stuff. You know, what's really important for me is there's a special kind of friendship that's being built across our games label right now. There's around 20 teams around the world on that label. And I feel like I'm living a bit of a dream, because my dream was always developers working together equals stronger. And this is exactly what's happening. So early years of our label, it's been incredibly exciting. Overcooked. Please tell me a lot of you are playing this game, because if you're not, you need to. You know, Overcooked is Ghost Town Games. They're based in Cambridge. I've shared with you 2 people. I still ask myself every day how they managed to pull off what they did. They basically did the PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 simultaneous ship. August last year, 2 guys. 2 people. When you look at how indie development is today, that's an example. You know, and don't get me wrong, Overcooked is one of the most amazing games. We fell in love with it. Like, I feel like we're as much involved in that game as anything. But they picked up 2 BAFTAs this year. Interestingly, Best British Game. But also they picked up Best Family Game. And it might sound crazy, but they beat Pokemon Go. They beat Pokemon, and that's fine if you're a console PC gamer and you dish mobile. Let's just put it in perspective, right? In brand perception and mainstream audiences, it beat Pokemon Go. Last week, I think it was last week, we've been in games development, making games, wrapping up right now, so our minds are a little bit crazy. But they were at the Developer Awards. They also picked up Best New IP at the Developer Awards. They beat Horizon Zero last week. This is an indie team of 2 people. Absolutely mind-blowing. Escapist, everybody, I shared a lot about Chris there. You know, he was working on a building site, never made a game before. He'd made a kind of an indie type game for himself, but he never released a commercial game. He was putting roof tiles on a building site when I met Chris. You know, Sheltered over here is a team Unicube. They're based in Shrewsbury. They came and worked in Team 17's incubation unit for a year. We run a very cool incubation team within Team 17 Studios up in Wakefield. We don't take many teams on at any one time. There's only 2 to 3 allowed in that incubation. It's quite intense in terms of our time and management. Those guys, when I met them, one was working in Screwfix and the other one was working at Cineworld. I love the concept. You know, for me, I'm in that fortunate position, we make games, so I'm not afraid of what somebody's talent can be. We can help them with their talent, but nobody can come up with it. It's coming up with that great idea in the first place. So that shares a bit. Those guys have hired their first bunch of staff. They've got their nice office up in Shrewsbury, and they are now a commercially successful indie developer, having generated over 7 figures worth of revenue from their first game. Escapist is, I think, around $30 million now, as an example. So Chris has done okay. You know, Overcooked, I can't share their numbers, you know, but let's just say it's doing very, very well. You know, so what shows passion? Developers working together, it's working really well. But our label is working with teams all over. The future, crystal ball. Somebody actually asked me last week what I thought the indie dev scene would be like in 10 years. And I went, pardon? Let's just try and think 2 years, right? It's hard. The key thing for Team 17, for people who have followed what we do a little bit more, last year I sold a minority stake. It's a little bit like selling a bit of your child, right? People who know me, I did it for a reason. I bought investment into Team 17. My backers are Lloyds Banking Group, minority stake. We keep board control, really important for our independent side. Lloyds Banking Group, without boring everybody, is Lloyds Bank. They have a private equity group. We make no secret of who they are. They're fabulous. They're hands-off. They allow us to do what we do. The reason we did this is what I've shared with you, that early years, the success that we're having. We wanted to escalate this fast to an international level. And that was taking our story, taking our program global. I showed you their sheltered, escapist, overcooked, all UK teams for a reason. We wanted to take it fully international. I think since September last year, I've now signed 12 games. Most of those haven't been announced. They'll be coming over the next few years with teams in North America, Australia, Scandinavia, Germany, and many other areas, as well as the UK. Looks really pretty, when people say Team 17, you make worms, I kind of go, do you want to look? Because we don't. We do a lot of things here, and we're working with a lot of great people. Getting onto Team 17's label is really, really hard. It's the hardest part of my job. I have to say no quite often. We give our hearts, we give our souls, and everything that we are goes into working with our partners. The reason why we're so successful is we can only manage so many. 99.9% of the games that come into us, we unfortunately have to say no to. Is there a specific type of game that we sign? I always say no. We look for great games or great ideas. I have a couple of people in my incubation who are complete unknowns who have great ideas. They're not announced, so I can't mention those titles. But one of those guys was writing advertising for Groupon a year ago. He is now in a full program where we're teaching him Unity, game design, and many other aspects. Like I said, we only take a few in there. It's hard to get onto our label. We are looking constantly for the right kind of games. Great games, great people, people who share our vision in terms of creating sustainable companies, working hard. We are so not an ego type company. We are a sanity, not a vanity company, as I call it. I'm really ever on Twitter as an example. I always say to indie developers, time is the biggest asset that you have. Use it wisely. You can't spend 10, 15 hours on Twitter and make video games. You cannot do this. We like people who share visions, and that is building sustainable games companies, creating new IP, and hopefully building for the future. Playtonic, I'm incredibly fortunate to work with. For those of you who don't know Playtonic are a bunch of guys who used to work at Rare. They created Banjo-Kazooie, worked on Donkey Kong Country. I think last time I looked at some data for on games that they've created, they generated something like $4 billion worth of revenue in the games industry. I'm helping them build a sustainable business. I'm helping them build a complete new studio. They're at 25 people now. This is all part of what this is. It's not just about making games, it's about building something special. So I'm going to share a few videos here, because I feel like I've been talking a lot, and I really don't like doing that, of some of our up-and-coming games. Some you may have seen, some hopefully not.
Before Arthur's golden age, our realm was lost in decadence, shattered Distraught, we were a broken Britannia. No one expected our great king's path of ascension to be paved by so much sorrow and destruction. Such a catastrophe would shape the fortunes of all. The kingdoms, once united, were torn apart. Indeed, we were a broken Britannia. In a time before Arthur, we needed a symbol to inspire change. We needed an omen.
Before I quickly race through these, I just want to say there's 3 games that you just saw there. Sword Legacy Omen is being made in South America, in Brazil. Very small indie team. This is their first commercial game that's being made, small team. Yoku's Island Express is being made over in Sweden. Those guys are ex-Starbreeze, so they've worked on Payday. The lead designer on it created The Darkness, which some of you may know. Radiation Blue on Genesis Alpha 1 are based over in Germany. It's 5 people. Incredible. Yoku's is 2 people, by the way, and Soul Legacy is a handful of people too. But Genesis team, they are ex-IO Interactive Hitman, just to give you a little bit of heritage on who these people are and where they come from. So just some very quick final thoughts. Don't want to preach, so I'll do this quickly. I'm going to share here a little bit. People go Team 17 from 2013 till now. You guys have just gone like this. Reason. I always thought I was the stupid one in the boardroom. I was the one who didn't think the same as everybody else in that room. Took me a while to realize who I was as an individual. Never mind leading a company, never mind doing what I do today. It took me a long time to do that. I just want to say to people, you know, sometimes if you're sat there and you think you're a stupid one, please don't. It may just be that you think you're different. You know, it's okay to think different. And often it may be that you're the one with the vision in the room. So speak up, it makes a difference. Don't waste your energy on people who say no. Microsoft and Sony will say, I'm a pain in the backside when they say no to me. And I get put forward for a lot of awards. I personally don't put myself forward for anything. I recently picked up Disruptor Award for the North of England for all industries. And I actually think now that gives me the right to actually break rules because I've been awarded for this. That's okay, right? It's okay to break rules if you're doing good stuff. I would say if you're building a business, if you're looking to start out, don't waste your energy on negative people, right? Don't waste your energy on people who say no. Surround yourself with positive people and believe in what you're doing. It's okay to fail as long as you've tried. Just remember this stuff. It's important. Be introspective and brave. Really important. Always be honest with yourself. You know, the amount of times I meet people who want to make games and really what they want is they want the stardom. They don't want to do the hard work. Making games is hard work. Hard work. I always say to teams, just focus on the game. If it's a great game, you're going to get all that anyway. You know, I've got teams who absolutely don't even want to do press interviews, and I have to beg them to do interviews because they're so focused on creating their games. You know, always be honest and be brutally honest with yourselves as a team collectively. This is what makes success and how it helps you. Plan. Have at least A and B, but preferably more. Most people will say I have D, E, and F usually. It's all in the planning. If you're a startup, if you're just starting out as a startup, or you're building a business from start, always have plans, A, B, C, D, and E. Most people go, well, my game's going to be overnight hit, that's fine. I don't know anybody who's successful who started making video games for money. Most of us start making video games for a passion. You know, always look at the plans and make sure you plan. I always say to people, the minute you take on one employee, responsibility time, dudes. You know, you're responsible for them. You know, if they're married, they've got kids, that's mortgages, that's school fees, whatever it may be. Take those responsibilities very seriously and do your planning. It's important. Don't forget to value teamwork. Teamwork will bring to any business, be a team player. And, you know, really, I can't stress this enough. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than people. People are what makes success. People are what make games, all of it. People that you work with are the most important people in your lives, you know, apart from your family, but, yeah, they're important too, right? I make games. But seriously, really important. And there we go. Okay. If you have questions, just put your hands up. Okay, on the front.
Okay. Is this a sort of funny observation, really? I mean, like, obviously talking about the empathy side and the team side of things, often a lot of people who work on, obviously I work in the visual effects industry, so it's affects me too. A lot of the best people actually don't have very good social skills.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I'm horrendous.
Semi-autistic. How do you manage that? Do you feel like you feel like sort of shout to them, working track with the rest of the team better?
We have, personally, I'm terrible, right? My whole team will tell you I'm horrendous. I don't even like doing this stuff because I suffer with nerves too. But I have to push myself now, and I have to say, just overcome it and challenge yourself. From a business point of view, what we've done is opened up the way that we work. Everything in our companies is open plan as an example, right? I don't have an office. I have a desk on the floor in development, in the studio, and I also have one in the commercial team. My finance operations director, they're out on the floor too. We have no behind closed doors offices for anybody in our company. We do a huge amount of work on team building. We have social days constantly. We do games jams. We work very, very hard to overcome that, you know. And let's not forget games developers. You know, for those of us who are games developers, we're not the most outgoing anyway. You know, headphones are usually, I'm notorious for it. I have, in my desk, I can have a couple of screens, 2 to 3 screens at any one time on, headphones on, head down, and I can be anywhere. You know, my people are often hitting me on the head and throwing stuff at me and saying, listen, you know, so you've got to work at it. But we do a huge amount of work in that space. Sorry, go.
When you're working with the external teams, are you actually like financially contributing so they can pay themselves where they make the game, or is it all reward at the end when it's used?
Yes, we do. I've even had, right, I can't mention this game, please, none of you put this on Twitter, right? I have a developer that I'm working with right now who's a single guy who was working his day job. Milestone 1 was quit the day job. I'm funding, and we fund, yes. Depends on what people want, but we fully fund as well. Please.
Did you ever at one point in your life felt like giving up?
Doing what? Games?
Giving up.
Giving up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say early 90s. Early 2000. I think we had a rough ride 2003 to 2006. It's 30 years I've been in the games industry, right? That's 3 decades. I probably love my industry more now than what I did when I started. I can't imagine. When people say to me, I got asked a question recently, what would you do if you didn't work in the games industry? I couldn't answer it, to be honest. That is totally unthinkable for me. I can't even think that way. You know, I'm like, really? That's like saying it's not even worth thinking about. Love it.
Are there any other sort of companies out there, games companies, or just other companies in general, whose sort of corporate culture you kind of admire as well? I mean, what do you think like Valve or?
Without working in their office on a day-to-day basis, I don't think any of us really know what a company culture is, to be honest. So I'm a bit of a realist too. There's a number of companies. I'm a big fan of Paradox. I love Paradox. I love the way that they do things and the way that they work on a day-to-day. Valve, it's no secret, Gabe is my idol, right? That's publicly well known. I would stalk the man if he lived in this country, I'm sure. You know. Yeah, look, he's done fireside chats, and I've been like that far from the front row, and I'm the geek in the room too, wanting his autograph and all of it. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Thank you one more time. We must be ready to